What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have everybody here today. Excited to get another episode out to you guys after the Dogs absolutely dismantle Vandy this weekend. 55 to nothing, 55 to nothing, drumming the Vanderbilt Commodores, who came to Athens for homecoming yet again this year. And they're eventually probably going to learn it's probably not the best to come to Athens for homecoming. But hey, that ain't up to me to figure out. That's up for somebody else to figure out. We got a fun show to get to, you guys. A lot to get to in this game, a lot to get to in games around the country because there were some big games around the country. We're going to get to all that later on in the episode. Right off the top here was checking the AP poll and just put the tweet out. Dawgs still on top of the AP poll. Expected that to be the case and glad to see that that's the case. Not very surprised by it. I kind of put my top four up yesterday. Ohio State being off this week kind of skews it a little bit because I know a lot of times when a team's not playing, it feels, I guess you would say, wrong for taking that team and dropping them in the rankings, especially when teams are doing so well around them. When you have Georgia, who won dominantly, when you have the game that happened between Tennessee and Alabama happen, the game that Michigan and Penn State happened in these top 10 matchups, when you have those games that are happening, some change-up has got to happen. And that's what happened. So, in the top 10 right now, we're just going to run through the top 10 of the latest AP poll that did drop. Dogs on top, like I said, at 1. My prediction was it was going to be Georgia, either Tennessee and Michigan, and then Tennessee and Michigan at 2 or 3. One of the two, flip or flop. And then Ohio State at 4. But they got Dogs at top with 31 overall votes. You got Ohio State in second with 17. And then you have Tennessee at third with 15. Then you get Michigan. They do jump Clemson up to that 4 spot. Clemson drops 1 to 5, even though they beat FSU. Alabama at 6. So basically, Alabama and Tennessee just swapped spots there. Tennessee getting some votes for first place there. 7th is Ole Miss. Now you got another big matchup that could be coming up between 6 Alabama and 7 Ole Miss. Here in just a little bit, at 8 you got TCU, 9 is UCLA, and 10 is Oregon. That continues to be something we talk about every week. We want Oregon to be good. We want Oregon to win games. It just makes that game that you dominated them 49-3 in the season opener all that much better. Instead of that team not being relevant, not ranked, and people looking going, Georgia, you hadn't played a big game. This team has now found themselves back in the top 10, and Georgia absolutely obliterated them to start the season. And they again round up that top 10 at the ranking of 5-1, jumping up a couple of spots. So that's your top 10. That's your top 10 in the SEC. Or not in the SEC, in the country, I should say. And Dogs continue to stay on top, and we're just going to leave it right there. We don't need to talk like we did last week that oh, we don't want to be here. Oh, let somebody else have. We got it. Again, all we can do is defend it. So that's where we stand as far as the AP poll goes. Glad to see the Dogs still on top. I'm excited about it. Decided to go with the red this week. If you guys are watching on YouTube, I appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow us there as well as on Twitter at DogTalk20. Again, a lot to get to here. I found a couple of fun stats from this Vandy game that we had in here that we're going to run through here in a minute. We're going to go through the keys from what it was this past week and what we anticipated seeing and what it ended up being, as well as the picks and all that good stuff as well. So, again, glad to have you guys here as we get rocking on another show. Let's jump into the Vandy recap. Again, Dogs on top, 55-0. Very glad to see it. Georgia clicking on all cylinders in this game. Was very glad to see it. Stetson Bennett looked good. Our run game looked good. All of the things that we wanted to see look very good in this game. Georgia putting up 14 points in the first and the second quarter to have that 28-0 lead going at the half. A couple of field goals there in the third quarter, and then what you would normally see as maybe a conservative Georgia team when they get into the fourth quarter and have a big lead. That didn't happen. We scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter with third and fourth string guys on the field to put it away easily, 55-0, getting things started very early. Kenny Mack getting that touchdown pass from Stetson Bennett. Then you got a Kenny Mack run in there as well to John Edwards with a touchdown, seeing Dominique Blaylock back in this game. Multiple guys getting their hands on the ball, which you love to see, absolutely love to see. Week in and week out, getting more and more guys handles, getting more and more guys touches, and seeing Stetson continue to progress, kind of picking back up where we left off from those first few weeks after the last few weeks not getting a single touchdown pass. He bounced back from that. Bounced back, looked really good in this game. He went on the night 24 for 36 incomplete passes. That was it. 80%, sitting at 80%, had 289 yards, right at 300 yards for the night, averaging 9.6 yards an attempt, and then the adjusted is 11 yards, 2 touchdowns on the night from him. And then you get Carson Beck there in the fourth quarter, third quarter, even in that second half. He goes 8 for 11. That's good enough to be almost 73%, 98 yards, almost touches 100 yards. Again, we didn't go conservative in the fourth quarter, and I love to see it. We just continued to put it down their throat. He also throws 2 touchdown passes in this second half of this ball game as well. On the run game again looked very good again this week. We end up rushing the ball, 38 times, 192 yards, and had 3 touchdowns on the ground as well. 4 through the air, 3 on the ground. And DeJon Edwards leads that charge, 10 touches, 49 yards. He had a touchdown on the night. Kenny Mack had 9 touches, 43 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, 1 through the air with 20 yards through the air. Branson Robinson as well, 8 carries, 34 yards, no touchdowns. Stetson Bennett did scramble a few times to get 9 in this, and then kind of a wild one there at the end. Cash Jones with a 36-yard dash for a touchdown as well. Receiving, like we said, Kenny Mack got 2 in this one for a touchdown, 2 touches, 20 yards, a touchdown. Darnell Washington leading the charge, 78 yards on 4 catches, a couple of one-handed snags in there too with the right hand and then the left. He's a freak. That dude's huge and he's good. Man, he's a good football player. Glad to have him on our side. Dylan Bell also had a great night in here. Lab McConkey, this is one, I guess, injury front we're going to have to keep an eye on. It looked to me like maybe he just tweaked his foot. I didn't really see anything with the knee. But again, I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not on the medical side of things. When it comes to this, all I can tell you is just what I saw and what I hope, because it, again, didn't really look like the knee buckled. It looked more like maybe something was going on with his foot. So we'll continue to kind of monitor that as the week goes and let you guys know what we come up with. Again, luckily, we're into the bye. We've got 2 weeks right now where we kind of just get to coast. I'm not going to say we're coasting, but this week and next, it's going to be preparing for Florida. But in the back of your mind, that weekend after that, Tennessee is coming to Athens. And you better believe Kirby's going to have these guys rocking and rolling. Not only getting prepared for Florida, but also putting some of those schemes for Tennessee also being able to slow down, because our defense is going to have to be elite when that comes. I'm not trying to overlook Florida. I'm not trying to. But I think Georgia can come in here with their head on their shoulders, knowing what they have to get into in this game against Florida down in Jacksonville this next week, not this coming week. And I think Georgia's going to get the job done. We're going to work hard to get to that point. But we're not going to overlook the fact that there is a very, very, very large game looming after that. But back to this here. Offensively looked good. Glad to see Arik Gilbert get in there as well, get a touchdown as well, and see those guys kind of crowding around him. Now, let's jump to some of these keys of the game that we had from this past week. This was it. And to me, I think we touched every single thing we needed to. Offensively, we wanted to protect the ball. We didn't have it. I think Stetson fumbled at one time and we fell back on it. We established the run game, again, 192, what did we end up with? 198 yards, right at 200 yards, is that right? 192, I was right, 3 touchdowns. We established the run game and we got it going early. We were up 28-0 at the half, ended this one 55-0. So all of those. Defensively, we tackled like we were supposed to. We got a turnover in this one. Could have had 2 in here, but did get Tyke Smith actually punched the ball out and Christopher Smith falling on it. We got a turnover. Dominant defense, and this is where I'm going to get to some of this. So check marks beside all of them, because keys to the game, we nailed each and every single one of them. This is a huge stat to me. I tweeted this out, and I want to make sure you guys hear and see this one, because to me it meant a lot. I got to look back at it to make sure that I get it right here. But at halftime, Georgia had a 28-0 lead. These were the things that I said as far as what we looked at the half. Seemed to be hitting on all cylinders. Stetson Bennett at the time was 18 for 20, 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. He would go on for a few more yards, but wasn't in much longer. Rushing at that time, we had 85 yards with 2 touchdowns. We would get one more touchdown and almost 107 more yards for the rest of the game. Dominique Blaylock had his first touchdown for the first time since 2019 with Georgia. Arik Gilbert also getting his first touchdown in a Georgia uniform at the end of this game as well. This is the big statistic to me, and this is where that key to the game, dominant defense, came into play heavily. I tweeted this at halftime. We've held Vandy to just 105 total yards. That's 101 passing and 4 yards. 105. Let me just look right here. Vandy ended the game with 150 total yards. That means 45. That was it. 45 yards is what they gained for the rest of the night. At the time, it was 101 yards passing. They ended the night with 105. So they ended up with 4 more yards through the air in the entire second half of this football game. Running the ball, they had 4 yards at the half. They end up with 45. So was that 44 or 41? Excuse me, 41 yards in that. That's unbelievable. They literally moved the ball for 49 more yards than they did in the first half. 105, 40, 50, 45, excuse me. I knew I had something wrong when I was writing it down earlier. 45 yards, that's all Vandy got in the second half. That was it. 45 yards. If that's not defensively locking a team down when a team should be trying to get back in a game, you're down 28-0. If you score, make it 28-7, get a field goal, 28-10, you can start to feel a little bit of life, maybe some momentum shift. That didn't happen. Georgia locked it down. I know it's Vanderbilt, but still, to see Georgia do this in such a fashion. Again, I told you guys last week, Vanderbilt was in the game with Ole Miss. At the halftime, they were winning this football game against Ole Miss, who is now the number 7 team in the country, undefeated. And Vanderbilt gave them everything they wanted by halftime. Georgia at the half was up 28-0 and allowed them 45 yards for the rest of the football game. That's it. That was it. They flip-flopped. They were rushing really not much, passing the ball for 100 yards and rushing it, we'll just say 5. And for the rest of the game, 45, and it kind of flip-flopped. They didn't get but 4 yards for the rest of the game through the air. That's it. That was it. And they did rush the ball again, 41 yards for the rest of the game. But 41 yards, you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Dawgs' defense locked it down. And not to give them all the credit in the world, but also an offensive stat that I found that I thought was pretty interesting I want to share with you. Georgia had 8 receivers in this game. Not just one guy, but 8 receivers with 20 yards or more. 8. That's how much we were spreading the ball out to different guys. Brock Bowers was not the leading charge in this one. Like I said earlier, this was Darnell Washington was the leading receiver in this game. Again, he had 78 yards. He was the one with the most. Behind him, you get a Dylan Bell at 54. Lab McConkey, 49. Brock Bowers only had 15 yards in this game. Not that he wasn't a contributing factor in this game. Marcus Rosalie Jack Saint, 48. Dominique Blaylock, 35 and a touchdown. Kieris, 35 and a touchdown. Jackson Meek, 25. Arik Gilbert, 16 and a touchdown. Denial Morset, 12 yards in this game as well. Huge game for Georgia's offensive receivers. 8 receivers getting in this game, tight ends included, obviously. 8 receivers, 20 yards or more, 6 of which had 35 yards or more in this game. 4 touchdowns through the air and 3 of which on the ground. Great night for Georgia. Offensively, defensively, you did everything you needed to do in this game to win. Everything was just in your favor. You're at home. You had a good crowd. Everything was going exactly the way that it should have in this one. And no taking away from the defense in this one as well as far as individual statistics. Again, there's no I in team, but we're still going to talk about some of these guys who did contribute and make a big difference in this game. Christopher Smith, 5 tackles in this game, all of them solos, one of which was a tackle for loss. Also picking up that fumble that Tyke Smith did force in this game as well. Jamon Dumas-Johnson right behind him, 4 tackles in this one. Jalen Walker, 4. Ryan Davis, 3. Keely Ringo, 3. Ton of guys getting their hands on the field and getting their hands on guys and making tackles in this game. There was nobody in this game on defense who came in and did not get a tackle. Didn't get a tackle in this game that I'm looking at least on this list. Could be wrong about that. But Lab McConkey looked good. Returning, Kieris Jackson even got back there and was able to return a couple in this one as well. Again, prayers out to Lad. Hopefully nothing major going on there with that leg. Hopefully it's a simple, hey, we got 2 weeks to kind of rest, get guys healthy, get these guys back by the time we play Florida, especially by the time we play Tennessee. We're playing right now with losing a couple of receivers. Right now we don't have Jalen Carter on the field, but we're not going to make the excuses. Again, if we lose a football game, it just happens. It stinks, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to make excuses for it like some people will. But it will be nice to have some of these guys back, and I think this break comes at a good time. We get some of these guys, again, rested and back healthy as we get prepared for Jacksonville coming up in 2 weeks, where we head down to Jacksonville to play in the greatest outdoor cocktail party, 3:30 on CBS, and I'm looking forward to that. Not to take away from this Vandy game. Everybody that got put points on the board. Jack Pod leads it with 13. Kenny Max 12. Dylan Bell touchdown. Dominic Blaylock touchdown. Dejon Edwards touchdown. Arik Gilbert's touchdown. Cash Jones touchdown. all of these guys rocking and rolling. Not to take away from the fact of some of our other injuries too. Hoping we get Kendall Milton back. Hopefully we get him back healthy. Ladd, obviously, after this, want to see him get back healthy as well. A couple of our other guys didn't see A.D. Mitchell, didn't see Arian Smith much in this game either. So hoping to get these guys back and hopefully get them healthy. Hopefully that wasn't too loud for you guys there. But that's where we're staying. Dogs on top, 55-0. Look very good in this game. Very glad to see Georgia taking care of business, not letting Vanderbilt sit here and play around, not letting Vanderbilt try to make a difference in this game. Didn't matter. First downs, 30 for Georgia, 10 for Vandy. Third down efficiency, we look good, 8 for 13, 5 for 13 for them. 1 for 1 on fourth downs. This matters because Georgia right now, I think, is 5 for 5. We're 100% on the season so far, which is very exciting. Georgia, three penalties in this game. And that was it, holding the ball for most of this game. Did want to look back as well at kind of the stats because this has changed a little bit too. Right now, Georgia has climbed up to 10th in the country at 41.7 points per game. We are now second as well on defense, holding teams just to 9.1 points per game. So important to see that defensive stat continue to rise, and we continue to choke teams out like we have in years past, especially last year. And we're hoping that we continue that. Hopefully we continue that trend and continue to put points on the board. Again, I'm glad to see that number offensively starting to rise back up because that was one thing that I looked at preseason was the opportunity for Georgia to really put up more points this year because I felt like our offense had the ability to do that. Again, 8 guys are getting touches. 8 wide receivers in this game are getting touches for multiple yards. Again, 8 of which are 20 yards or more, and then 6 of which are 35 or more. That may not be a huge stat to you. Most of you guys might want to hear me say something like, we had 4 guys getting 100 yards. That didn't happen. We're spreading the ball out to many, many more guys than just that. Many, many more guys than that. So glad to see it again. Dogs on top, 55-0 in this one, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Georgia can do here in a couple of weeks once we get a little bit healthier on this bye week and we get prepared for Jacksonville coming up next week. At the end of this week, we are going to do an episode. It'll either be the end of this week or the Sunday episode next week when I'll have I'll get Hunter back on and we'll talk a little bit about some football, what's going on around the country, how we feel about Georgia so far, what we think is to come because there are some big games and I still think the toughest of the schedule is still to come, and we're going to run through that with some of these other big games around the country, and that'll kind of lay itself out for kind of what we're thinking on that. But I don't plan to take a break during this. We'll look at some other little fun things here and there and kind of keep things rolling through these next couple of weeks as we get prepared, like I said, for Jacksonville on the rise. Looking back at the picks of the week, not the best week. Not the best week here. Ended up 2-5 on the week, and I'm going to take my losses. Falling to 28 and 22-1 on the season. I took Georgia and Vandy. Again, I told you guys I wasn't sure about the spread. It was 38 against Vandy, and anytime I've picked it, it seems like Georgia doesn't quite cover it all the time. So I just didn't want this to be that opportunity. Like I said, this could have been a 38-10 game. It still doesn't cover. It could have been a 38-0 game, and it doesn't cover. But in the end, Georgia does win. Felt good about Mississippi State. Thought that they would look good with Will Rogers continuing his just slinging the ball all over the field. He did a little bit, but not really. It slowed way down. I think this game was tied at like 3-3 at the half. And Kentucky ends up beating them. Kentucky beats them and lose both of those. Obviously, taking Mississippi State and the points there just didn't happen. So losing both of those. Then Ole Miss did take care of Auburn, but couldn't cover the 15. Thought they would right there at the end, but it didn't. Even I would have taken a push on that over a loss. But go 1-1 on that game. And then this was my depending factor was if Bryce Young plays. I thought Alabama would win by 7. And then if he didn't, I thought Tennessee would win by 7. And Bryce Young played and Tennessee won by. Doesn't matter the points, but Tennessee won. That's all that matters. Give them the points, obviously. Nuts. 2-5 on the week. Wasn't great. Wasn't the greatest thing in the world. But, again, Georgia taking care of Vandy. Was glad to see that. Meant to go back when I was looking at the keys to the game and also say that the dog of the day. And this one I'm giving it to the entire Georgia defense. I'm giving it to them all again. When you're only giving up 101 yards at the half and you end the game with 150, only giving up 49 in the second half, that's a pretty good, or 45, I think it was 105 and then 45. I mean, I can't say enough. I'd love to pick Darnell Washington or Stetson Bennett, maybe even Christopher Smith in this game and give them the keys. But I got to give it to that defense, locking it down, doing their job. Again, only allowing 45 yards in the second half. Impressive. Blows my mind. So let's get to some of the other big games around the country. Obviously, you just saw some of the picks on there, so you know how some of these games are going to line up. But what a weekend! What a weekend! We're not going to start with a big one. I'm going to kind of save that for a second. But did have some big ones. Clemson traveled down to Florida State in a close one. They started to pull away with it for a little bit, but then Florida State came back late in this game, but it didn't matter. 34-28. Clemson does pull it off. That is again why I think Michigan ends up jumping up there. In Tennessee, I mean, you got to give them credit, but we'll get there. Auburn fighting with Ole Miss. Thought Ole Miss would take care of business again, handily, not quite. 34-48. They kept letting Auburn back in this game. I don't know if they're trying to keep Brian Harsin on staff so that way, these teams can keep beating them. I don't really know. I don't know if he still has a job right now while we're sitting here talking, to be honest with you. But Auburn stayed in this football game, but Ole Miss does pull it out 48-34. USC. This was another one we talked about. I couldn't believe, somehow, again, Vegas gets it right from time to time, and they did in this one. Utah was like a 3-point favorite at home. They end up winning the game 43-42 over number 7 USC. More than likely, USC's hopes for getting in the college football playoff are now dashed. Maybe not. Maybe they play Oregon later on in the season, or Pac-12 championship. However it works over there, I don't know, to be honest with you. And maybe if they win that game, it gives them enough to say, hey, Georgia beat them and we beat them, so give us a chance. I don't know. We'll see how rankings continue. And again, it's not going to matter till December before those come out. Mississippi State, again, not doing what I thought they would do against Kentucky, especially after the way Kentucky looked against South Carolina, again, without Will Levis. But that made a big difference in this game. Kentucky ends up winning it 27-17. Oklahoma upsetting Kansas 52-42. Texas struggling with Iowa State 24-21. Let's see, there were a couple of other bigger ones I thought. Yeah, North Carolina was struggling with Duke for a while, but they came back to win that one 38-35. Arkansas taking care of BYU 52-35. Again, you get these quarterbacks back, and all of a sudden it's a huge difference in the game. TCU and Oklahoma State go to double overtime, and TCU, number 13, upsetting number 8, Oklahoma State 43-40. Syracuse also staying undefeated there at the 18th spot over North Carolina State 24-9, even though North Carolina State now without their quarterback. Penn State falling to number 5 Michigan. Michigan absolutely throttling it. This was a good game at the half. And at one point I was like, man, this is a low-scoring game. And then all of a sudden they came alive before the half. But then Michigan just kept going. 41-17 is where that one ends. And our friends over in Statesboro ends up upsetting the number 25 team in the country, 45-38, taking that undefeated James Madison team down. And then we get to the big one. The big one that ended the night out for most people. I say it ended it. Pac-12 was playing late. I didn't even see the end of the Utah-USC game, to be honest with you. But it's Alabama and Tennessee. Alabama-Tennessee. Tennessee, for the first time in Nick Saban's history, for the first time since Twitter was invented, for the first time you could FaceTime somebody, and a multitude of other things that we've talked about that have been invented or have become a thing since the last time Tennessee beat Alabama. Now they get to see it now. You see the post of Tennessee beating Alabama on Twitter because, again, Twitter was not a thing back when Instagram wasn't. Instagram came out in, 2010? They hadn't beat them. They hadn't beat them in 10 years. It's been 15 years under Nick Saban. I think 16 years is how long it's been since Tennessee beat Alabama. Like I told you guys on here, I felt eventually this has to come to an end. I wasn't sure if it was going to be this weekend, I'll be honest with you, but it was. It ended up being this weekend that happened. Tennessee taking them down 59-42. Have to give credit to Tennessee here. Their offense is good. Their defense is still not. Again, when you're giving up 49 points, again, it's Alabama, but still, when you're giving up 49 points, your defense isn't that good. But a team in whose defense we thought was good was Alabama, but that secondary is not. They were getting gashed left and right by number 11 for Tennessee. So, it happens. I had a couple of things I did want to say on this. Alabama falling 49-52 to Tennessee. Tennessee now jumping up to the top 3 in that third spot. They're a contender now. We talked about this last week, looking at the preseason predictions, and I told you guys, looking at my helmet schedule right here in front of me, the only game I had preseason that Alabama loses this season is to Tennessee. I have Alabama right there, 11-1, finishing first in the West, playing for the SEC championship game. Their only loss coming right there to Tennessee. Talked about this last week. We talked about it at the beginning of season 3 of Dawg Talk this season, coming into the 2022 season. The only one I thought they would lose. Again, I think that's because I felt like Tennessee is getting better and better. And the only reason I think that I probably have Georgia, 12-0 on here, beating Tennessee in that week is because this game happened before. And Georgia gets to at least have a little bit of an insight of what to kind of expect. And luckily, again, like I said, and I don't remember if I tweeted this out or not, I'm glad this game's not a Neyland. I'll be honest with you. It doesn't mean that I'm afraid of it, but I would much rather have that home field advantage. And we got to show up and show out. We have got to show up and show out when they come to Sanford Stadium on November 5th, because this game is going to be huge. Again, for everybody that keeps saying, quit overlooking Florida, we're not. I'm not going to be on the field. I can look over whoever I want. I can look forward to Georgia Tech at the end of the season if I want to. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to be on the field playing. I'm just glad and looking forward to a huge game that's going to be at home on November 5th. Do I want us to take care of Florida? Yeah. Is that game not as big if we lose to Florida? Yeah. But right now, I get to look forward and say, hey, I'm really looking forward to that November 5th, because right now it's more than likely a 1 versus 2. And if something happens with Ohio State, all of a sudden it's a 1, or 1 versus 3, all of a sudden then it could be a 1 versus 2. There's a lot to happen. A lot to happen here for the next couple of weeks. Right now, Tennessee has Alabama, and then they play. They got nobody, so they got an easy week. Georgia, Florida, obviously we get the week off before we play one another. Mississippi State, is that who I see for Alabama there? I'm blind as a bat today for whatever reason looking across here. Sorry, I'll pull this other schedule out that I don't have written all over. Yeah, Alabama, Tennessee, they got Mississippi State. Don't sleep on that one. Luckily, that one's at home for Alabama. A couple other teams that are off. Tennessee has UT Martin. Should take care of business there. Then Kentucky. And then they've already played their bye. So their bye is over. They're done with their bye of the season. So they got UT Martin, luckily. Kentucky they have at home, and then they have to come to us. So that does help. It kind of helps having Kentucky the week before they have to play us. We have Florida. And Florida, that's proven to be a game that when we play it, we battle adversity and battle injuries and get injured in that game. Hopefully this can be one maybe similar to last year, where we kind of take care of business in the first half and we can get some experience in there while not giving up the game, but get experience in there to understand that the week after this is going to be much, much larger than the largest outdoor cocktail party that we're going to have there next weekend on the 29th. So I'm going to continue to look forward to that because, again, I think it's just a huge game. I think it's a very big game, and I think everybody else thinks that too and knows that. I did want to look here and just make sure I didn't have one other thing that I needed to run over before it. Dog of the week, picks, got all that. That was the thing, was the preseason. And I know even last week I was like, I don't know if it happens, but I was just kind of excited that I got that right. I didn't get it right about other teams, and we talked about that last week. Arkansas, I thought would finish well, and they aren't. Ole Miss, I still have 11-2 on the season. I still felt like, I don't know how I have, no, 10-2, excuse me. I still feel like they could have a really good season. I even had Tennessee or Texas A&M 10-2. That's not going to happen, obviously, after falling to App State and some of these others. But Ole Miss still looks to be on track. Heck, even LSU still looks to be on track after taking down Florida last week. But Alabama, right on cue with where they should be in the season so far. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Falling to Tennessee. That was kind of the preseason. Now let's look at some of the Twitter polls that I did want to look back at from this past week and see where we shaped up in a couple of these. I got to make sure I keep all my stuff pulled up because I'm bad about it. I will just get rid of my page from where we played in this game, and then I'll go to the poll and I'll be sitting here going, I don't know if we actually broke that or not. So let me jump back through the polls here for you guys real quick. Just bear with me as I scroll through with it. In the meantime, you guys, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at DawgTalk20. If you hadn't checked out the YouTube channel yet, make sure you guys do that as well. Like and subscribe to the channel, or like the video when we're doing it. Like now, if you guys are watching, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment if you guys want to, if you guys enjoy the show or not. I greatly appreciate that. Shout out to you, Jeff. Also want to make sure if you guys want to support the show, you guys can do that as well. All of this in the link of the description of the YouTube channel, the video, wherever you guys are listening on podcasts. I put that pod link up now. Wherever you guys are listening, you guys can click on that link. It'll take you wherever you want to go to listen to the show as well. I tried to make it a little bit simpler for you guys. A different piece of news here. Unfortunately, the Braves do fall. Hated to see that, but what it was. Did predict this game against Vandy to be 48-6, and when we scored 48, I was like, all right, that looks pretty good. And I was looking at the time, and I was like, there's no way they kick 2 field goals on us here. Maybe one, maybe they drive down, which I should have known better considering we only gave up 45 yards in the second half. But Georgia looked good, looked really good. I'll take not getting that perfect at 48-6 and 55-0. I'll take that for sure. So all right, now here we go to the polls on Twitter this past week. Do the Dogs shut Vandy out on Saturday? Well, it ends at 50-50. Ends at 50-50, so I guess half of you got it right, half of you didn't. Then we go, Stetson Bennett total touchdowns versus Vandy. He ended up with 2. 0-1 had 20%, and then 2-3 and 4+ had 40%. So 40% of you guys going with 2-3 nailed that one. Dogs rushing yards versus Vandy. Thought we would have a little bit more than we did, but we didn't. Less than 250 yards. You are the winners at 44%. More than 250 was at 56%. Leading receiver versus Vandy. Brock Bowers, Lab McConkey, Darnell Washington, or other. 0% of you guys. Nobody voting for Darnell, and he's the one that was at the top. Brock actually was one of the lower this week, and then Lad there at 38%. Leading rusher versus Vandy. Here's one that it's good to have this up because I think it was Dejan, was it not? Yeah, Dejan, 49 yards, right above Kenny Mack at 43. And then, crazy enough, Cash Jones with that 1 carry for 36. Branson Robinson with 8 carries for 34. But leading rushers versus Vandy, Kenny Mack, Dejan Edwards, Branson Robinson. 52% of you guys going with Dejan. Ding, ding, you hit the winner. Branson Robinson was at 29% and Kenny Mack at 19%. Then upset of the week is it Tennessee over Bama, Penn State over Michigan, or FSU over Clemson. 42% of you guys going with Penn State over Michigan. Didn't happen. FSU over Clemson. 41% of you guys didn't happen. And only 17% of y'all going with Tennessee over Alabama. And that's what hit. That 17% nailed it there. So glad to see it. Glad to see that the Dogs ended up rolling in this one at least. And that's where we end on the polls. Again, Dogs on top this week. Not only against Vandy, but we also end this poll. The AP poll here in the week 7. At the top as well. So, hey, I don't hate that, and I was glad to see it as well. Glad to see the Dogs continue to roll, and we'll see if we can't just continue to roll as I click the wrong button trying to intro or exit out of this thing. Glad to see the Dogs continue to roll and look forward to the bye week, getting some of our guys again healthy and back in shape here as we get prepared for Jacksonville here coming up in a couple of weeks where we will take on Florida at that time. But we'll check in with you guys next week. Looking forward to it. Go Dogs.